"From now on, you eat at my table," said the Mafia boss, after seeing her count coins for lunch. The smell of industrial bleach and cheap lemon-scented air freshener clung to Ava's clothes, a chemical perfume she shed in the gray stillness of the staff locker room. Her morning shift was over. 12 rooms, 12 toilets scrubbed, 12 sets of pristine white sheets pulled taut over mattresses used by people whose lives she could not begin to imagine. Her lower back throbbed in a dull, familiar rhythm, a persistent ache that was the simple price of independence. She was exhausted, but she was not a victim. She was tired, yes, but she was her own. She paid her own rent. She owed nobody. As she pushed through the heavy glass lobby doors of the Grand City Hotel, the humid afternoon air of the city hit her, thick with exhaust fumes and the distant savory scent of street vendor pretzels. She clutched the thin strap of her canvas bag, the meager cash tips from the morning, a small, satisfying weight in her jeans pocket. It was enough. It had to be. The Red and Ready Deli was 3 blocks down, a narrow slot of a place with buzzing fluorescent lights and a perpetually sticky floor. It sat on the edge of a large parking lot known for its unofficial business. Ava ignored the men who leaned against cars, their eyes following her, and pushed inside. The bell above the door jangled weakly. Sal, the owner, gave her a tired nod from behind the counter, sweat beading on his forehead as he sliced pastrami. Ava moved to the small, scratched plastic table in the corner, her designated spot, and sat down. She pulled her coin purse from her bag. It was not a purse. Really, it was an old, zippered bank pouch, the fabric soft with wear. She poured the contents onto the table, a small, disappointing pile of silver and copper. She began to stack 4 quarters. She needed 6 for the half sandwich special, yesterday's bread, a smear of turkey roll, and a single slice of processed cheese. She began sorting the dimes, her fingers meticulous, her head bowed. She blocked out the noise of the deli, the sizzle of the grill, the rumble of traffic, the loud argument in a foreign language from the kitchen. In this moment, there was only the math. She was short by 35 cents, a hot, sharp sting of humiliation pricked behind her eyes. She would have to settle for the plain, day-old roll. She pushed the coins back into their pouch, the small failure settling like a stone in her stomach. Across the street, the world was silent. Vincent Moretti sat in the back of his Escalade, the windows tinted so dark they were just black mirrors to the outside world. The armored glass muted the city into a distant, underwater hum. He was not supposed to be here. He was supposed to be halfway to the docks to oversee a shipment that would secure his dominance over the west side, but his driver had taken a detour to avoid a sudden police blockade, and now they were parked in the one place he had told his men to avoid during daylight. A collection was happening in the parking lot behind the deli. One of his capos, Russo, handling a disciplinary matter with a local bookie who had gotten greedy. Vincent was just waiting for the signal that it was done. He despised sloppy work and public displays. He glanced idly out the window, his gaze landing on the deli, and on her. He watched her walk in, the way she kept her shoulders straight even as she looked at the ground. A familiar gesture of someone trying to be invisible. He watched her sit at the corner table, her back to the room, as if trying to shrink. He saw her empty the pouch. He watched her count. He saw the precise moment her shoulders slumped. A tiny, almost imperceptible collapse. He watched her recount, as if the coins might multiply through sheer will. He had seen women beg. He had seen women barter. He had seen women use their beauty as a weapon or a shield. He'd never seen this quiet, desperate, dignified arithmetic. Russo was forgotten. The shipment was forgotten. He was consumed by the sight of her bowed head and her careful, stacking fingers. He did not signal his driver. He simply opened his own door, a move that sent a silent ripple of panic through his security detail in the follow car. Vincent Moretti did not walk. He arrived. He stepped onto the broken pavement, a $3,000 custom-tailored suit absorbing the grime of the neighborhood without a whisper. He adjusted his cuffs and walked across the street. The men in the parking lot froze, their business halting mid-threat. Vincent ignored them. The bell above the deli door announced his arrival. Sal looked up from the slicer, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated terror. He dropped the pastrami. "Mr. Moretti," Sal stammered, wiping his hands frantically on his apron. I didn't expect... I swear, the protection money, it's..." Vincent raised a single hand, silencing him. The casual, absolute authority in the gesture choked the air from the room. He did not look at Ava. He kept his back to her table. He spoke to Sal, his voice a low, gravelly sound that filled the small space and seemed to vibrate in the glass. "The half-sandwich special? The soup of the day? The real soup, not the watered-down one you keep for the end of the night? A side salad and a bottle of the imported water." Sal nodded, paralyzed. For you, Mr. Moretti? To go?" "For the young lady in the corner," Vincent said, still not looking at her. "And whatever else she wants, for the rest of the week." He pulled a thick wad of cash from the inner pocket of his breast and dropped several large bills on the counter. The amount was obscene for this place, enough to cover a month of sandwiches. "This covers it." At the sound of his voice, Ava had frozen, her hand covering her empty pouch. She recognized the vibration of power before she ever saw the man. When he said, "For the young lady in the corner," her head snapped up. She saw the suit, the broad back, the absolute stillness of the air around him. She saw Sal's white-knuckled grip on the counter. Ava stood up, her chair scraping loudly on the linoleum. "No," she said. Her voice was thin, but it was clear, and it cut through the sudden, heavy silence. Vincent Moretti finally turned. He was not handsome in the classical sense. His face was a map of hard angles, a nose that had clearly been broken and reset, and eyes so dark they seemed to pull the light from the room. He looked at her, and for the first time in her life, Ava felt well and truly seen. It was a terrifying, invasive feeling. I can pay for my own food," she said, her pride warring with a sudden, cold fear. "I just want to roll." Vincent studied her. He did not smile. He did not sneer. He simply watched her, as if she were a complex problem he was deciding how to solve. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "I know." He turned back to Sal. "You heard her. She wants a roll." He looked back at Ava, his gaze unwavering. "But the offer stands." He started to leave, then paused at the door, holding it open. The sunlight framed him, turning him into a dark, imposing silhouette. He looked at Sal, who was trembling. "Sal, tell her the rest." Sal swallowed, his eyes darting between the dangerous man at the door and the stubborn girl by the table. He said... Sal stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He said, "From now on, you eat at his table." The words hung in the air. A command, a promise, a threat. Vincent held Ava's gaze for one more second, an eternity, then left. The bell jangled, a weak, tinny sound in the wake of his departure. The silence he left behind was heavier than his presence. Ava felt dizzy. She grabbed her bag, sweeping the pouch inside without zipping it, and ran out the door. "Wait!" she called out. He had only just reached his SUV. The back door was being held open for him by a man built like a refrigerator. Vincent paused, his hand on the door, and turned to face her on the sidewalk. She stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. She was angry. Fear was a luxury she could not afford, but anger was fuel. "I don't know who you think you are," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "But I don't take charity. I don't know what you think that was. But I don't need anyone to buy my lunch." The men in the parking lot were gone. The street was suddenly, unnervingly quiet. Only the black Escalade remained, its engine purring like a large, patient predator. Vincent looked at her. The sun caught the faint lines of exhaustion under her eyes and the stubborn set of her jaw. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice was softer out here, without the confines of the deli to amplify it. "That doesn't matter," she retorted. "I won't accept it. Take your money back." I didn't offer you charity, Vincent said. He took a step closer, not menacingly, but simply to close the distance. He smelled like expensive soap and something cold, like winter air. I offered you a meal. There's a difference. It's the same thing. No, he said, his voice dropping. It's not. I was in that parking lot watching my men beat a man for stealing $200. That's business. I watched you count out pennies for a sandwich you couldn't afford, and you didn't ask anyone for anything. That's different. He looked her square in the eyes, his gaze so intense she felt it in her chest. I don't respect the man who stole. I respect people who don't beg. Ava stared at him. The logic of his world so twisted and brutal it almost made sense. He was offering respect, not pity, but it felt just as dangerous. The raw, understated violence he had just admitted to, watching my men beat a man, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. I have to go, she said, taking a step back, breaking the invisible line he had drawn between them. I have another job. He did not try to stop her. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable. You'll be late. Ava turned and walked away, her legs feeling unsteady. She did not run, but she walked faster than she ever had, her shoulders rigid. She could feel his eyes on her back, a physical weight, all the way until she turned the corner. She did not look back. She did not see him get into the SUV. She did not see the SUV fail to move. Vincent watched the empty corner where she had disappeared. Russo, he said into the silence of the truck. His driver, Russo, flinched. Boss? Find out who she is. Yes, boss. The business in the lot is handled. Vincent waved a hand dismissively. He was no longer thinking about the docks, or the man who had stolen from him. He was thinking about the flush that rose on her cheeks when she was angry, and the tremor in her voice when she said no to him. No one said no to him. He found himself, much to his own surprise, strangely affected. Her second job was at the Spin and Dry laundromat. 6 stops on the crosstown bus. It was a place of endless, mindless repetition. The chemical smell of detergent and hot dryer lint replaced the hotel bleach. From 4 in the afternoon until midnight, she was the attendant, swiping cards, making change, and folding clothes for the customers who paid for the wash and fold service. It was dim and usually quiet. Tonight, it was not. A man had been sitting on the bench across from the folding tables for over an hour, not doing laundry. He was wiry, with lank, greasy hair and a jacket that was too heavy for the season. He just watched her. Every time she looked up, his eyes were on her hands, folding towels, or on her face. A prickle of unease crawled up her neck. She had dealt with creeps before. The key was to ignore them, be professional, and stay behind the counter. But this one was different. He finally stood up, stretching like a cat, and ambled over to the counter. You work late, he said, his voice a low drawl. We close at midnight, Ava said, not looking up from the stack of T-shirts. Lonely place to be at midnight. He leaned in, and she could smell stale beer and old sweat. Maybe you want some company? Before Ava could even answer. The front bell of the laundromat jangled. 2 men walked in. They were not here to do laundry. They were large, dressed in simple tracksuits, and moved with a silent, coordinated purpose. They did not even look at Ava. They walked directly to the creep, flanking him. There a problem here? The first one asked, his voice polite. The greasy man's smile vanished. I was just talking to the lady. She doesn't want to talk. The second man said, I think you should leave. The first one added, the man's bravado tried to hold, Who the hell are you? The first man smiled, a tight, unpleasant gesture. He lightly tapped the man's chest, right over his heart. Just a quick poke. We're the guys who just saved you an ambulance ride. Now go, and don't come back to this block. The man's eyes darted between them. He saw something Ava could not. A certainty, a promise of casual violence. He paled, grabbed his jacket, and scurried out the door without a backward glance. The 2 men turned to Ava. You okay, miss? The first one asked. Ava nodded, clutching the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs. Who sent you? Just making sure the machines are working right, the first man said, not answering her question. Have a good night. And just like that, they were gone, melting back into the night. Ava sank under her stool. He said, "From now on, you eat at his table." She was beginning to realize that table was much larger than a deli booth, and it cast a very long shadow. She got home at 20 minutes past midnight. Her apartment was on the 4th floor of a walk-up with a broken buzzer and a stench of old garbage in the stairwell. She navigated the dark, musty stairs, her keys clutched between her fingers like a weapon. As she did every night, she had 3 locks on her door, a deadbolt, a chain, and a strike plate she had reinforced herself. She undid them one by one, exhaustion settling on her like a shroud. She pushed the door open, toed off her sneakers, and flicked on the single lamp in her studio apartment, and froze. Sitting neatly on the center of her worn linoleum floor was a brown paper bag, a good one, thick, from an expensive grocery store she would never enter. Her blood ran cold. She had locked the door, all 3 locks. She checked the window. It was locked from the inside, the fire escape empty. How had they gotten in? She approached the bag as if it were a bomb. There was no note. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was not a threat. It was a sandwich, fresh, thick-cut roast beef on rye bread, an apple, so polished it shined, a small container of potato salad, and a bottle of the same imported water from the deli. Someone had been in her apartment. Someone had picked her locks, entered her private space, the one place on earth she felt safe, and left her lunch. It was not kindness. It was a message. It was a violation. I can get to you. I can get in anywhere. You are not safe without me. She did not eat the sandwich. She sat on her bed, staring at the bag, and for the first time in years, Ava Delaney felt truly, terrifyingly afraid downtown in a penthouse office that overlooked the glittering, heartless city. Vincent Moretti swirled amber liquid in a heavy crystal glass. The ice clinked. Russo stood silently by the desk. "She wasn't at the laundromat tonight, boss," Russo said. "The 2 men we left. They said she never showed up for her shift." "She was there," Vincent said, not looking up. "She was just scared. Rightfully so. The creep is handled." He motioned to the file on his desk. Russo had been efficient. He had found her. Ava Delaney, 24 years old. He had read the file 3 times. It was tragically simple. Foster care from age 10. After her mother overdosed and her father disappeared, emancipated at 18. No siblings, no connections. She had worked at a diner, then a cleaning service, and now the hotel and the laundromat. Her bank account, illegally obtained by his men, showed a balance of $42.16. She paid her rent on time, every month, usually in cash on the last possible day. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. She was utterly, completely alone, a ghost in the city, working herself to the bone just to exist. He thought back to the deli, the way she had counted those coins, the way she had faced him down on the sidewalk, a tiny, furious thing standing up to a man who had ended lives for less. He closed the file. "The locks on her apartment building are shit," Vincent said. "Fix the main door, and put a new deadbolt on her unit, a real one. Do it tomorrow while she's at the hotel." "And the food?" Russo asked. "A different delivery," Vincent said. "To the hotel staff room, anonymous. But good, I don't want her scared. I want her fed." Russo nodded, though he looked confused. "Boss, if you don't mind me asking, why? She's nobody." Vincent took a slow sip of his whiskey. He looked out the window, at the millions of lights, millions of nobodies. "She's not nobody," he said, more to himself than to Russo. "She's the only person I've met all year who isn't trying to take something." He finished his drink. He had decided this city was full of wolves, and she was walking through it without any protection. He would be her protection. Whether she wanted it or not, he would keep her safe. He would make sure she never had to count coins again. For 3 days, Ava's life was defined by a strange, new rhythm. The food deliveries at the hotel continued. They appeared in the staff break room, always on a shelf marked Ava D. and always with enough to share. Thick sandwiches on focaccia, fresh fruit salads, cold pasta. Her coworkers were thrilled. Ava was mortified. She ate the food, a hot shame mixing with the undeniable relief of a full stomach. The second change was her apartment door. She had arrived home from the laundromat 2 nights ago to find a solid steel deadbolt installed where her flimsy chain used to be. Not just on her door, but on the building's main entrance as well. There was no note, no explanation. Just the silent, heavy, metallic presence of his protection. He had been in her apartment. The thought still made her skin crawl, but he had also secured it. He was a monster who fixed locks, a shadow who brought her lunch. She was folding a set of king-sized sheets at the spin and dry when the bell jangled. Her head snapped up, her heart leaping into her throat, expecting the greasy man or another one of his silent, tracksuit-wearing guardians. It was him. Vincent Moretti looked spectacularly, absurdly out of place. He was wearing dark slacks and a gray cashmere sweater so soft it seemed to absorb the harsh fluorescent light. In his hand, he held a single, black high-end canvas duffel bag. The 2 other customers in the laundromat, a young mother and an old man, did not look up. To them, he was just another man. To Ava, he was a bomb that had just walked into the room. He didn't approach her counter. He walked over to the largest, industrial-sized washer, opened the duffel, and dumped its contents inside. It was just clothes, normal clothes, jeans, shirts. It was the most normal thing she had ever seen him do. He looked at the machine, a complex panel of dials and buttons, with a look of genuine, mild confusion. He was pretending. He had to be. He turned to the soap dispenser, pulled a $20 bill from his pocket, and tried to feed it into the slot that only accepted quarters. Ava couldn't help it. She sighed, a small, frustrated sound. She put down the sheet, walked out from behind the counter, and marched over to him. "It only takes quarters," she said, her voice low. Vincent turned to her. His dark eyes were calm, but there was a flicker of something, amusement, maybe in them. "I see. And you can't just put a 20 in the change machine. It'll jam." She pointed to the small sign, "Maximum 5. He looked at the sign, then at her, as if she were the most interesting part of the room. "You seem to know the rules." "I work here." She crossed her arms, a futile gesture of defense. "What do you want, Mr. Moretti?" "Vincent," he corrected her, his voice soft, but it held the weight of a command. "And I'm doing my laundry." "No, you're not." It was out of her mouth before she could stop it. "You're lurking." He almost smiled. The edge of his mouth twitched. "Lurking." He considered the word. "I suppose I am." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a different roll of bills, peeling off a 1. He fed it into the change machine, and a cascade of quarters clattered into the metal cup. He scooped them up. "Why?" she asked, exasperated. "The food, the locks. The men who came in here. The food, you needed to eat," he said simply, as if stating a fact of nature. "The locks, you needed to be safe. The men, you needed to be left alone." He turned back to the washer and began feeding quarters into the slot. "I told you. I respect people who don't beg. I don't like seeing them in trouble." "That's not trouble," she argued, her voice a fierce whisper. "That's just life. My life. The one I was handling just fine." "Were you?" he asked. He didn't look at her. He just looked at the machine as it whirred to life, water beginning to hiss inside. Counting coins for a day-old roll? Is that handling it? The truth of it stung her. "It's my business." "It is," he agreed. He leaned against the rumbling machine, his presence dominating the small aisle. He was completely relaxed, yet a coil of energy seemed to hum around him. But it offended me, to watch it. He looked at her, his gaze dropping to her hands, which were red and chapped from the hotel bleach and the laundry detergent. "You're done here at midnight." "It's my shift," she said, confused by the non sequitur. "You're not working it tonight." He stated it, didn't ask. "You're coming with me. I'm not going anywhere with you. I have a job." "You did. Until I bought your manager's early retirement an hour ago. He's very happy. The new owner. he gestured to himself, is giving you the night off. Ava's stomach dropped. He had bought the laundromat. He had just bought it. The casual, absolute power of it terrified her. This wasn't protection, this was possession. You can't do that, she whispered, her anger dissolving into a cold dread. I can, he said. He wasn't unkind, but his finality was brutal. And I did. It was this. Or you were going to be fired in the morning for the incident with the brick. He paused. He was watching her too closely. Wait. The brick? What brick? She asked, her blood running cold. His expression hardened. Never mind, he had misspoken. Mixed up his timelines. It didn't matter. He changed tactics. Let me buy you a proper meal. Not in a bag, not at a deli counter. She looked at him. At this impossible, dangerous man who had just bought her workplace as a conversational gambit. She should have run. She should have screamed, but the outline said curiosity. And it was more than that. It was a desperate, aching need to understand. Why her? What did he see in that deli? Why are you doing this? Because, Vincent said, I want to have dinner with you, and I hate eating alone. She looked at her hands, then at the half-folded sheet. She thought about the cold, empty apartment. She thought about the $40 in her bank account. She thought about the last time anyone had asked her, truly asked her, to sit at a table with them. It had been years. If I go, she said, meeting his eyes, do you promise? Will you just be normal? No buying things, no? Whatever this is, he nodded. Just dinner. I'll even let you walk home, if you still want to. Fine, she said, her voice barely audible. Fine, but I have to change. You look fine, he said. And the simple, unadorned compliment struck her harder than any threat. The restaurant was called Il Sospetto, the suspect. It had no sign, just an old, carved wooden door on a cobblestone side street she never knew existed. Vincent didn't use the front door. He led her down a side alley, through a kitchen buzzing with frantic, quiet energy, past chefs who nodded Signor Moretti with reverence, and into a small, private dining room. It was not a room, it was a wine cellar, a curved, brick-lined alcove with a single, small, round table set for two. It was lit by a dozen real candles, the flames reflecting in the dark bottles that lined the walls. It was silent, warm, and smelled like old wood and dried herbs. She had worn her only good outfit, a dark blue dress she'd bought at a thrift store. She suddenly felt like a child playing dress-up. This is... she started. This is your restaurant. My family's, he corrected, pulling the heavy chair out for her. She hesitated, then sat. He slid the chair in, his hands brushing her shoulders for a fraction of a second. The contact was electric, a small jolt of warmth that traveled straight down her spine. He sat opposite her. A waiter appeared from the shadows, poured deep red wine into Vincent's glass and water into hers without being asked. You don't drink? Vincent asked. I can't afford to, Ava said honestly. And I don't like the taste. He nodded, as if she'd given a perfectly reasonable answer. I'll have water too, he told the waiter, who looked shocked but disappeared without a word. You don't have to do that. I know. He leaned back, the candlelight playing over the hard planes of his face, softening them. So, Ava Delaney, tell me something that file didn't... She stiffened. The file? The one I ran on you after the deli. He said it casually, as if admitting he'd checked the weather. It told me where you lived, where you worked, and that you have no one. It was very... empty. It's my life, she said, bristling. It's not empty, it's just mine. Is it? He asked, his voice genuinely curious. You work 20 hours a day. You sleep in a room you can't protect. You eat food others throw away. That's not a life. That's survival. The food arrived, platters of it. Soft, handmade pasta in a rich, dark rag. Bread that steamed when she broke it open. Roasted vegetables glistening with olive oil. It was a feast. It was a statement. She ate, and it was a revelation. It was the first hot, truly nourishing meal she'd had in... She couldn't remember. And she talked. She didn't mean to. But he was so quiet. Such a good listener. He didn't interrupt. He just watched her. his dark eyes focused, as if she were the only person in the world. She told him about the hotel, the ridiculous requests of the guests. She told him about her first job at a diner and how the cook taught her to flip an omelet. She told him about the small garden she tried to keep on her fire escape before the pigeons ate the tomatoes. Small, meaningless pieces. But he didn't treat them as meaningless. He asked questions. What kind of tomatoes? Did you ever get the omelet right? And you? She asked, emboldened by the food and the strange intimacy of the cellar. What is your file, say? He smiled. A true, slow smile that transformed his face, erasing the danger and replacing it with an almost boyish charm. It says I'm in the import-export business. And are you? I am, he said. I import things people want, and I export things they don't. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. My father started this place. He believed a meal could solve any problem. A man who eats at your table, he's family, or he's neutralized. Either way, the problem is solved. And which one am I? Ava asked, her heart thumping. His gaze held hers. I haven't decided yet. Outside, on the cobblestone street, a cherry-red muscle car slowed down. It was loud, obnoxious, and entirely out of place in this quiet neighborhood. The man in the passenger seat, a rival capo named Rico Spadaro, had been tailing Vincent's movements for a week. He couldn't believe his luck. He saw Vincent's Escalade parked in the alley, and he saw, through the barred cellar window, a flicker of candlelight. He lifted his phone. He couldn't get a clear shot of the room, but he saw the silhouette of Moretti. And with him, a woman, a nobody, a civilian, a weakness. The phone camera flashed, a tiny pinpoint spike of light inside the cellar. Ava was talking about the laundromat. Vincent's head lifted, his eyes narrowing. He had seen it. The flash, a reflection off the wine bottles. What's wrong? Ava asked, stopping mid-sentence. Vincent's mask of calm was back in place instantly. Nothing. He signaled for the check, though no check would ever come. The kitchen is closing. We should go. He walked her home, as he'd promised. The streets were dark, the air damp and cool. The city felt different with him beside her. The usual shadows and threats seemed to retreat, to pull back from the bubble of stillness he carried with him. When they reached her block, she turned to him. The new lock on the front door gleamed under the streetlight. Thank you, she said, for the dinner. It was a lot. It was just pasta, Ava. It wasn't to me. She hesitated. You can go. I'm safe from here. He looked up at her building. I'll take you up. No. Her independence flared. You said I could walk. This is me, walking. I said you could walk home, he countered, not moving. I'm insisting on a ride, from the sidewalk to your door. She sighed. It was pointless to argue. He walked her up the 4 flights of stairs, his steps silent on the concrete beside her own weary ones. At her door, she fumbled with the new key. It felt heavy, unfamiliar. He waited patiently. When the door was open, she turned. Good night, Vincent, she said, using his first name. It felt strange on her tongue. Good night, Ava. He didn't move to come in. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her, his gaze lingering on her face. Locked the door. He waited until he heard the solid, heavy thunk of the new deadbolt sliding into place. Then, he walked back down into the city he owned. That night, Ava lay awake in her bed. She was safe. She was full. But she was not asleep. She kept replaying the dinner, his voice, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She remembered the gentle way he'd corrected the waiter, the intense focus he'd given her small, stupid stories. It was a kindness more potent than any food. She was terrified of him, and she was terrified of how much she wanted to see him again. Miles away, in a smoke-filled room above a social club, Vincent sat at the head of a long table. His capos were shouting. Russo was presenting figures on a ledger. A turf war was brewing with Spadaro's crew. And I'm telling you, boss, they're moving on our docks, one of them yelled. Vincent's mind was not on the docks. It was in a brick-lined wine cellar. He was thinking about the way her hair fell across her face. He was thinking about her telling him about the pigeons. A life so small and so hard, and she was still trying to grow something. "Vincent," Russo said, his voice sharp with frustration. "Did you hear me?" Vincent lifted his head. The room went dead silent. His eyes, which had been soft with memory, were now cold, flat, and hard as granite. "I heard you, Russo," he said, his voice a low growl that promised violence. "I heard all of you. Settle it and do it quietly. You're giving me a headache." He was thinking about a girl in a cheap blue dress, and he was realizing, with a cold, sinking feeling, that he had just put her in more danger than she had ever been in her life. The next day, Ava arrived at the laundromat. She was half expecting it to be closed, or for Vincent to be there, waiting. But it was just the spin and dry, the lights were on, the same old manager was behind the counter, looking pale and nervous, but very much not retired. "Mr. Sultan?" she asked, confused. "Ava," he said, wringing his hands. Don't clock in, just go." "What? Why?" And then she heard it, a whistle, followed by a sickening crash. Glass exploded inward from the front window. A brick, wrapped in brown paper, skidded across the floor and slammed into the base of a dryer. Ava screamed, ducking behind the counter. The old manager yelped and ran into the back office. Silence. Ava, breathing hard, crawled out from behind the counter. The front of the laundromat was a gaping hole, cold air and the sound of traffic rushing in. She looked at the brick. There was a note tied to it with rough twine. Her hands shook so badly she could barely untie the knot. She pulled the paper free and unfolded it. 4 words, written in a thick, angry black marker. "Stay away from Moretti." She was still holding the note, her knees about to buckle, when the black Escalade screeched to a halt on the curb. Vincent was out before the car had fully stopped. He stormed into the laundromat, his face a mask of cold, white fury. His eyes went from the shattered window to the brick, to her face. "Are you hurt?" His voice was a rasp. She just shook her head, tears of anger and fear stinging her eyes. "You!" she finally choked out, shoving the note at his chest. "You did this. This is your fault. You and your table." She was yelling at him, at the most dangerous man in the city. "This is my life. This is my job. What am I supposed to do now?" He grabbed her by the shoulders, not hard, but to steady her, to make her look at him. "He's right," Vincent said, Asiu, his voice low and guttural. "You're fired." "What?" "You're not working here again. You're not working at the hotel again. It's not safe." He looked at the shattered glass, and his jaw tightened so hard a muscle pulsed. "I'm sorry, Ava." He was apologizing. He looked genuinely, profoundly sorry. Not for the violence, that was his world, but for the fact that it had touched hers. Ava looked at his hands on her shoulders. She looked at the devastation of the room. She looked at the note. She should have been terrified. She should have run, screaming, and never looked back. But as she met his dark, furious, protective eyes, she realized something else. She wasn't just scared, she was angry. But she wasn't running. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. Someone had seen her counting coins. Someone had bought her a meal. Someone had shattered a window to warn her away. She was suddenly, terrifyingly, at the very center of someone's world. She didn't pull away from his grip. "Where?" she asked, her voice shaking but defiant. "Am I supposed to go?" She did not have a job to go to. She did not have a routine. Ava's life, once a grueling, predictable loop of buses and bleach, had become a quiet, agonizing wait. Vincent had, in his own way, caged her. He had fired her from both jobs, claiming it was for her safety, but it felt like a severance, not of employment, but of herself. He had a new apartment set up for her, a nice 1-bedroom in a secure building, but she refused. She stayed in her 4th-floor walk-up, a stubborn act of defiance. He didn't fight her on it. He simply continued to fill her fridge, pay her rent, which she found out when her landlord awkwardly thanked her, and, she soon discovered, he watched her. It wasn't him. It was a man. A different man every 2 days, but they all had the same bored, patient, professional stillness. One sat in a gray sedan across the street, pretending to read a newspaper for 6 hours. Another favored the coffee shop on the corner, nursing the same cold cup. She had been a ghost in the city for years, and now, suddenly she had an entourage. On the third day, she snapped. She had spent the morning trying to find a job in the paper, only to realize any new boss would be subjected to the same him. She marched out of her building, spotted the day's shadow, a man in a dark jacket leaning against a lamppost, and walked straight past him. She went 2 blocks to a payphone and dialed the number on the simple, non-smart phone Vincent had given her, the one she'd sworn she would never use. He answered on the first ring. Ava. Not a question. "I am not a prisoner," she said, her voice shaking with a cold, quiet rage. "I'm at a payphone on Elm. I'm going to walk to the park, alone. Tell your man, the one in the ugly jacket, to go home." There was a long pause. She heard the faint sound of city traffic on his end, then nothing. "The park is not safe," he said. "Nowhere is safe," she retorted. "You taught me that, but I am not going to live my life waiting for you to tell me when I can or cannot buy milk. Call him off, Vincent, or I'll get on a bus and not stop until I'm in another state." Another silence, this one heavier. "Marco," he said, his voice distant, as if speaking to someone else. "Give her the park, 1 hour, but you do not let her out of your sight. You understand? Sight." He was back with her. "He will be there. You will not see him, but he will be there. And if I don't agree, then I will come down there myself and carry you back to your apartment," he said, his voice flat, a statement of simple, indisputable fact. 1 hour, Ava. He hung up. She stood there, the receiver in her hand, breathing hard. She looked back. The man in the ugly jacket was gone. She felt a small, bitter surge of victory. She walked to the park. She sat on a bench. She watched 2 mothers with their strollers, and for the entire hour, she felt the horrifying, invisible pressure of being watched. She went home. She was waiting on her front steps when his black Escalade pulled up. He got out, adjusting the cuffs of his dark suit. He looked at her, his face unreadable. "You had your walk. I'm not one of your possessions, Vincent," she said, her voice low. "You don't get to buy me and put me on a shelf. You don't get to assign me a keeper. My life was mine. It was hard, and it was ugly, but it was mine." He stood on the pavement below her, forcing him to look up at her. It was a small, petty advantage, but it was all she had. "I know," he said, and his sincerity disarmed her. "But that life is over. The men who threw that brick, they are not done. They are from a rival, Rico Spadaro. He is careless, and he is cruel. He knows I've been seen with you. To him, you are no longer a person. You are leverage. You are a way to get to me." He took a step up, so he was on the stair just below her. They were almost eye level. "The man, Marco, he's not there to keep you in," Vincent said, his dark eyes intense. "He's there to keep them out. I will not interfere. You can go where you want. You can do what you want, but he will be there. It is the only way I can guarantee—" He paused, searching for the word. "It is the only way. Unless it is life or death, he will not speak to you. He will not touch you." She searched his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation. She found none. He was simply stating the terms of her new reality. "Life or death," she repeated. "Life or death," he confirmed. She gave a short, bitter nod. "Fine." She turned to go inside. "Ava." She stopped, her hand on the door. "Eat," he said. "I had food sent up." Despite herself, she was falling for the quiet, brutal sincerity of his care. He never pushed. He never demanded. He simply was. He was the locked door, the full fridge, the shadow on the corner. He was the calm, terrifying center of a storm, and he had wrapped her in its eye. He still took her to dinner, always in the wine cellar at Il Sospetto. He would ask her about her day, and she would tell him about the book she was reading, or the old woman she'd spoken to in the park. And he listened. No one had ever listened to her. He would lean forward, his forearms on the table, and give her small, meaningless stories, the same intense focus he probably gave his import-export business. One night, after a quiet meal, she felt the walls of the cellar and her apartment and this new life pressing in. "I need air," she said. "Real air, not this." He didn't question her. He led her to his car, but he didn't drive to her apartment. He drove to the river, to the old industrial docks. It should have been terrifying. It was dark, empty, the skeletons of cranes looming against the bruised purple sky. But he got out and opened her door. "This is my family's first holding," he said, his voice softer in the vast, open space. "My grandfather won it in a card game. He said he owned the river." They walked along the heavy wooden planks, the water of the wide, black river lapping just below them. Marco was nowhere to be seen, but she knew he was there, a silent presence in the darkness. The air was cold, sharp with the smell of salt and diesel. She shivered, pulling her thin sweater tighter. Vincent stopped. He didn't offer his coat, a gesture she realized would have been a hollow cliché. Instead, he just stood beside her, watching the slow-moving water. As they stood there, his hand, covered in a soft black leather glove, found its way next to hers. He didn't grab her. He just lightly brushed the back of his gloved fingers against her bare ones. It was a whisper of a touch, leather on skin, warmth and cold. A question. Ava's heart hammered. She could have pulled away. She could have put her hands in her pockets. She did not. She let her hand rest there, almost, but not quite, touching his. It was a tiny, monumental surrender. He didn't push it. He just nodded, as if a decision had been made, and said, "Let's go. It's too cold for you." A few days later, he took her somewhere new. Not the penthouse, not the restaurant. He drove for nearly an hour, out of the city, to a sprawling, dark stone mansion set behind a 10-foot iron gate. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice small. The house was intimidating. "Home," he said, as if the word tasted strange. "The one I grew up in." It was a museum inside, heavy, dark furniture, portraits of ancestors who looked as unforgiving as he did, and a silence so thick it felt like velvet. He didn't give her a tour. He led her straight to a room at the back, a conservatory whose windows were dark with the night. In the center was not a grand piano, but an old, scarred wooden upright. "This was my mother's," he said. He ran a hand over the lid, and it was the most unguarded she had ever seen him. She played. "Every night," he said, his voice distant. "She said this was the only way to get the noise out of her head. My father. He created a lot of noise." It was a glimpse. A tiny, painful crack in the fortress. He was showing her a piece of his childhood, a softness he had inherited along with the violence. He sat on the bench and tentatively pressed a few keys. The sound was thin, and one note was painfully out of tune. He grimaced. "You don't play," she said, a small smile touching her lips for the first time that day. "I was never allowed to be soft enough," he said. He looked at the keys. Ava sat beside him on the bench. The proximity was startling. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I learned a little," she said quietly. "In one of the homes, they had an old one." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and placed her fingers on the keys. "This is a C chord. It's the first one you learn. It's simple. It's home base." She played it. The sound was clean, simple. He watched her hand, then he slowly, deliberately, placed his own hand next to hers, mirroring the shape. His large, calloused fingers, one of which bore a heavy gold ring, looked strange and out of place on the ivory. His pinky finger brushed against her thumb. The touch was a brand. The air in the room evaporated. There was no sound but the echo of the cord and the sudden, roaring rush of blood in Ava's ears. He didn't move. He just looked from their hands to her face. His eyes were dark, and she saw a raw, undisguised hunger there that had nothing to do with food. It was a different kind of table, a different kind of offering. She couldn't breathe. He drove her home. The silence in the Escalade was so loud it hurt. It was filled with the unresolved tension from the piano bench, with the brush of his hand, with the memory of his childhood. He walked her up the 4 flights of stairs. Marco was, as always, invisible. At her door. She fumbled for the key, the one he had given her. He put his hand on the door, stopping her. "Ava," he said. Just her name. It was a question, a plea, a warning. She looked up at him. He was so close. She could see the small, faded scar on his jaw, the individual, dark lashes of his eyes. He wasn't the monster. He wasn't the Mafia boss. He was just Vincent. And he was the only person who had ever seen her. She rose up on her toes. Just a fraction. It was all the invitation he needed. He didn't grab her. He didn't consume her. He met her. His lips were softer than she could have imagined, and they were hesitant. He kissed her as if he were afraid of breaking her, his hand coming up to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. It was a hesitant, breathless, achingly gentle kiss. It was a kiss of profound, unspoken longing. It tasted of the cold night air and a loneliness so deep it matched her own. For 1 second she melted. She let herself fall. And then the reality of what she was doing hit her. She was kissing him. Here. In this hallway. This man who had men beaten. This man who had a man watching her at this very moment. She pulled back, her breath catching in a sob. She put her fingers to her lips. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "I can't." His expression was wrecked. "Ava, no, don't." She finally got the key in the lock. I can't fall for you. Vincent, I don't want a life of shadows. I don't want to be a ghost waiting for a man who lives in the dark." She scrambled inside and slammed the door. Throwing the deadbolt, the heavy metallic thunk was the sound of her heart breaking. She leaned against the wood, sliding to the floor, as his footsteps, slow and heavy, receded down the stairs. The next day, she was a wreck. She hadn't slept. She felt raw, exposed, and stupidly, desperately, in love. She needed to walk. She needed to feel the normal, dirty, anonymous city. She went to the lobby. Marco was there, pretending to read a text. "I'm going to the corner store," she said, her voice sharp. "For milk." "I'll walk with you." "Miss." "No," she snapped, her frustration from the night before boiling over. "You will not. It is 50 yards away. It is broad daylight. It is life or death. Remember? I am buying milk. Not defecting. Stay here." She didn't wait for his answer. She pushed through the door, a small, rebellious thrill in her chest. She was her own. She took the shortcut, the back alley between the bodega and the dry cleaner, the one she had taken 1,000 times. It was a mistake. She was halfway down the narrow passage when they stepped out, one from behind a dumpster, one from a recessed doorway. They were not the greasy man from the laundromat. They were solid, professional. They wore work gloves. "Rico Spadaro sends his regards," the first one said. Ava didn't scream. She turned to run, but the second one grabbed her, his hand clamping over her mouth, his other arm like a steel band around her ribs. She was slammed back against the brick wall. Her head hit hard, and the world exploded in white-hot stars. "Moretti likes his new toy," the first one sneered, stepping close. "We just wanted to see if it breaks." He didn't hit her face. He was a professional. He drew back his fist and punched her, hard, in the stomach. The air left her body in a silent whoosh. The man holding her let her drop. She collapsed onto the filthy pavement, gasping like a fish. "Stay away from him, girlie," the man said. He kicked her, a solid, brutal impact to her ribs. "He can't protect you." She heard running footsteps. Marco. He rounded the corner, his gun drawn. "Police! Freeze!" he yelled. The 2 men were already gone, vanishing over a chain-link fence at the end of the alley. Marco was at her side, his face white with fury and self-loathing. He was already on his phone. "Boss, we have a code 10. The alley, Spadaro's men?" Yes, she is." Vincent Moretti was in a meeting about a shipping container when the call came. He listened for exactly 2 seconds. He stood up. "Russo, we're done." He walked out of the meeting. He didn't storm. He didn't yell. His movements became unnervingly calm, precise. He got into his car and spoke one word to his driver. "Spadaro's." They found Rico Spadaro at his social club, playing cards in the back room. Vincent didn't bring his crew. He walked in alone. The two bodyguards at the door moved to stop him. Vincent broke the first one's nose with his elbow and drove his knuckles into the second one's throat, all in one fluid, horrifying motion. He kicked the backroom door off its hinges. Rico looked up, his cards scattering. "Moretti, you got some balls, coming in." Vincent crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed Rico by his shirt front, hauled him out of his chair, and slammed his head into the wall. He didn't say a word. He just hit him. He hit him with a cold, methodical, terrifying brutality. It was not a fight. It was a disassembly. He dragged Rico up, his face a bloody mask. "You!" Vincent growled, his voice a low vibration. "Touched her." He threw Rico across the poker table, which splintered and collapsed. He was about to finish it. He saw a heavy glass ashtray on the floor. He picked it up. This was it. This was war. But as he raised his hand, he didn't see Rico's bloody face. He saw Ava's. He saw her face when she said, "I don't want a life of shadows." Killing Rico would plunge her into an eternal, bloody night. With a roar of pure, unadulterated rage, he hurled the ashtray into the wall, where it exploded. He grabbed the half-conscious Rico by his hair, yanking his head up. "This is for her," Vincent hissed, his voice raw. "Not the beating, the mercy. You live because she would not want this. You live because I am sparing her. Not you, but if you, or any of your men, ever look at her block again, I will not come here. I will go to your mother's house, and I will burn it to the ground with your entire family inside." He dropped him and walked out, his suit immaculate, his knuckles split and bleeding. He went straight to Ava's. He didn't knock. He used his own key, the one she didn't know he had. She was on the couch. Marco, looking sick, was putting a small butterfly bandage on her temple. She had a split lip, and she was holding a bag of frozen peas to her side, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. Vincent stopped in the doorway. He saw her. He saw the purple bruise already forming on her cheek. He saw the bandage, and he saw his own bloody hands. He had done this. His world had done this to her. His rage came back, but it was a different kind. It was cold, hard, and absolute. "Pack your things," he said. His voice was not his own. It was a stranger's, scraped from iron. Ava looked up, her eyes wide with fear, not of him, but of the man he had become. He was a mess. His hair was wild, his knuckles were dripping blood onto her floor, and there was a fresh cut over his eye. "Vincent," I said, "pack your things," he commanded, his voice rising. "You are moving in with me. Now, this is over. This is not a discussion." She saw the blood. She saw the fury in his eyes. This was the life of shadows. It was here. It had a key to her apartment. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No, look at you. This is what I can't, I won't." The adrenaline that had kept her together, the shock, the fear, it all gave way. The bag of peas slid to the floor. She covered her face, and a sob ripped through her body. A raw, animal sound of pure despair. The rage in Vincent's face vanished. It shattered, replaced by a look of such devastating self-hatred that it was worse than the anger. He had broken her. He took a step. She flinched. He stopped, as if she had struck him. "Ava," he whispered. He held up his bloody hands, as if realizing for the first time that he was scaring her. He went to the sink and washed them, the water turning pink. He came back, his hands clean but still raw. He knelt in front of her. He didn't try to demand anything. He just looked at her. "Broken. I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry." She couldn't stop crying. She was crying for her lost life, for the alley, for the piano, for the kiss. He couldn't stand it. He sat on the couch and pulled her into his arms, gently, so gently, as if she were made of glass. He was careful of her ribs, careful of her head. He just held her. He tucked her head under his chin and held her while she fell apart, his own body shaking. He buried his face in her hair. "I'm sorry," he said again, a broken mantra. I'm sorry. She didn't hug him back, but she didn't pull away. She just wept, her small, broken body collapsing against the man who was both her only protector and the source of all her pain. She did not move into the mansion. That would have been a surrender. Instead, after a long, quiet argument where she stood her ground and he stood his, a compromise was reached. It was Russo, Vincent's driver and man of all work, who had finally broken the stalemate. He had found her sitting on her couch, staring at the bandage on her head, and spoke, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Miss," he'd said, his hat in his hands. "He ain't sleeping, he ain't eating, he's just watching. And a man like him, when he just watches, people get hurt. He's going to burn this whole city down just to make sure the fire doesn't touch you. You moving in? It ain't for him. It's for everyone else." So she moved, not into the cold, sprawling stone museum he called home, but into the guest house. It was a small, 2-room cottage of ivy-covered stone, set 100 yards from the main house, separated by a dark, manicured lawn and a small, leafless garden. It was a cage, but it had its own key. And Vincent, to his credit, respected the boundary. He gave her space. He never entered, not once, unless she invited him. He would appear on her small stone patio in the evenings, a dark, silent shape, and wait. He wouldn't knock. He would just be there, until she saw him and opened the door. Their bond deepened in the quiet hours, in that small, neutral territory, the grand, echoing loneliness of the mansion, and the brutal and grinding poverty of her old life met in this small cottage. She had a kitchen, she had food, the best food, delivered daily. She started to cook, a simple, forgotten comfort. She would make soup or pasta, and he would sit at her small, 3-legged kitchen table, watching her, a man who commanded armies of chefs, looking grateful for a bowl of canned tomato and basil soup. He was a good listener, and she, he discovered, was a good talker. Once she felt safe, she told him about the different foster homes, about the woman who taught her to sew, about the boy who stole her only coat. He, in turn, shared stories of his own, not of his business, never that, but of his mother. She hated this house, he told her one night, staring out the window at the looming mansion. She said it was a big, beautiful mausoleum. She wanted to live in a small apartment downtown, above a bakery. Why didn't she? Ava asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Because, Vincent said, turning to look at her. My father owned the tomb, and you don't walk away from the man who owns the tomb. They were sleeping on opposite sides of the same world. She, in the soft, safe bed of the guest house, and he, in the massive, cold bedroom in the main house. Both of them lay awake, staring into their respective darknesses, separated by 100 yards of grass and a lifetime of violence. The change came one night, just after 3 a.m. A scream, thin and raw, ripped through the silence of the estate. Vincent was awake. He was always awake. He was on the guest house patio, as he was most nights, sitting in a cold iron chair, watching her windows. He was there in 3 seconds. He didn't knock. He violated his own rule, slamming the door open so hard it hit the wall. Ava! She was not in her bed. She was in the corner of the room, her knees pulled to her chest, her back pressed against the wall, her hands over her ears. She was shaking, a violent, rattling tremor that had nothing to do with the cold. She was not seeing him. She was seeing something else. Don't. She was whispering, a gasping, terrified sound. Please, no, I have it. I have the money. Please, don't. A nightmare. But it was more. It was a memory, the hint of an abusive ex, a ghost from her past that was more real than any of Spadaro's men. Vincent's heart, a muscle he thought long since hardened, clenched. He saw the real, deep, foundational terror he had only glimpsed before. Ava! He did not move toward her. He kept his voice low, calm. It's Vincent. You're in the guest house. You're safe. Look at me. Her head snapped up, her eyes wild and unfocused. It's me, he said again, kneeling slowly, his hands open and up. You're safe. I have you. No one is here. No one is ever going to hurt you like that again. He waited. She blinked, and the room, the guest house, the present, seemed to flood back into her eyes. The terror receded, replaced by a wave of crushing, humiliating shame. "Vincent," she breathed, her voice cracking. Only then did he move. He closed the distance in one step, sitting on the floor and pulling her out of the corner and into his arms. He didn't pull her to the bed. He just sat on the cold, hard floor and held her. He held her against his chest, his hand stroking the back of her hair, rocking her gently. "You're shaking," he whispered into her hair. He used to..." She choked, unable to finish. "Shh," Vincent commanded, his voice a low, rough growl. "He's gone. He doesn't exist. There is only this room. You are safe." He held her tighter, a fierce, possessive, protective grip. He held her until the shaking stopped, until her breathing slowed, until her body, exhausted, went boneless against his. He held her until the sun came up. The next night, the air between them was different. The barrier of his violence and her fear was still there, but it was thinner. He had seen her at her most broken, and he had not flinched. He had held her. He was on the patio, as usual. She opened the door. "Come in, Vincent," she said. It was the first time she had used those words. He came in. The guest house was warm. She had lit several small candles, their soft, flickering light a welcome change from the harsh overhead lamp. She was nervous. He was nervous. It was almost comical. He stopped in the middle of the small living room. She stood in front of him. "Thank you," she said, her voice small, "for last night." "There is nothing to thank me for," he said, his voice rough. "You stayed. You saw me. I see you. Ava," he said, and his dark eyes were so intense, so focused. She felt as if he could see the blood moving in her veins. "It's all I seem to do." He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. He traced the line of her jaw, his calloused thumb brushing her cheek, the one that had been bruised. "He will never touch you again." It was not a promise. It was a vow. She leaned into his hand, a small, trusting movement that shattered his restraint. He stepped closer, and his other hand came up to cup her face. He did not kiss her. He just looked at her, as if he were memorizing every part of her. He looked at her with a reverence, a worship, that unmade her. This was not a mafia boss. This was a man, starved. "Ava," he whispered, as if the name itself was a prayer. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. It was not the hesitant, desperate kiss on her apartment doorstep. This was a choice. This was an answer. His lips were soft, and for a moment he just let her kiss him, as if he couldn't believe it was real. Then, with a low groan that seemed to come from the very center of his soul, he kissed her back. His hands slid from her face into her hair, tangling in the strands, holding her head as if she were the most precious, fragile thing in the world. It was a slow, charged, emotional fire. Every gesture was gentle, measured. He broke the kiss to look at her, his forehead resting against hers. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his voice shaking. She didn't answer with words. She slid her hands up his chest, feeling the solid, thumping proof of his heart, and pulled him closer. It was not a taking. It was an offering. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing and carried her to the bed. He laid her down on the covers, and in the soft, flickering candlelight, he undressed her, slowly, his eyes worshipping every inch of her. He treated her not as a conquest, but as a discovery. His touch was not the brutal, demanding touch of her nightmares. It was achingly gentle. He kissed her collarbone, her shoulder, the sensitive skin of her wrists. Every gesture was a question, and her body, for the first time in her life, gave an unreserved yes. When he finally came inside her, it was a slow, profound joining. It was not passion, it was communion. She clung to him, her eyes wide open, watching his face in the candlelight. He looked wrecked, as if he were in pain, as if this one, simple, beautiful act was the most profound thing he had ever experienced. They moved together, a slow, sacred rhythm. He whispered promises into her skin, dark, impossible promises. "You're mine, always, no one else. I will burn the world for you." And she, lost in a way she had never been, whispered back, "I'm yours." Words neither of them understood, but words they both, in that moment, meant. She woke to the gray light of morning. She was warm. She was safe. She turned her head. Vincent was asleep, lying on his back beside her, one arm thrown protectively over her waist. Even in sleep, his face was different. The hard lines were gone, the mask of command was stripped away. He looked younger. He looked, she realized with a start, peaceful. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face, the first one that had ever reached her eyes, for the first time in her entire life. Ava Delaney felt completely and utterly safe. Meanwhile, across the city, that safety was being systematically dismantled. Rico Spadaro, recovering from Vincent's beating, had decided on a new kind of war. He couldn't beat Moretti with muscle, so he would use poison. He leaked the photograph. It was the grainy shot from the wine cellar. By 10 in the morning, it was on the front page of the city's worst gossip site, and by noon, it was being hinted at on the local news. Vito Moretti's new mistress, the city's most dangerous eligible bachelor, seen canoodling with a mystery woman. They painted her as a gold digger, a harlot, a civilian who had knowingly stepped into the underworld. They had made her famous. They had made her a target. Ava knew nothing of this. She spent the morning in the guest house, wrapped in a blanket, watching the rain, feeling a strange, new hope. It was almost evening when she decided to walk to the main house. She wanted to see him, to bring him a coffee. She didn't even make it to the main door. She heard voices from the terrace, where Vincent's top men were often gathered. It was Russo, and another, harsher voice she recognized as a capo. A total liability, the capo was saying, his voice sharp. I'm telling you, Vincent, she's a problem. Spadaro has plastered her face all over the damn internet. She ain't some secret anymore. She's a walking bullseye. Ava froze, hiding behind a large stone pillar. Russo's voice was lower. She's just a girl. Sal. She was just a girl. Sal spat. Now she's the girl who's sleeping with the boss. She's a liability. Every rival we got is going to be looking at her. She's going to get us all killed, or she's going to get herself killed. You need to cut her loose, boss, before it's too late. Ava didn't wait to hear Vincent's reply. She didn't want to hear him defend her. She didn't want to hear him agree. A liability, a walking bullseye. She backed away, silent as a ghost, and ran back to the guest house, the cold rain soaking her, the safety she had felt this morning, the smile, the warmth. It was all a lie. She wasn't a person to them. She was a thing, a problem to be managed, a liability to be cut loose. She packed. It didn't take long. She left the beautiful, soft clothes he had bought for her. She left the warm blankets. She put on the same worn jeans and thin sweater she had arrived in. She took her old, cracked canvas bag. She was a ghost again. She knew the guard patrols. She had been watching them for weeks. At 2 in the morning, there was a 3-minute gap when the west gate was unmanned. She slipped out, a shadow in the rain, and never looked back. Vincent woke just before dawn, the space beside him in his own bed empty. He had left her, finally around midnight, to give her sleep. But he had moved to the mansion. He went to the guest house. The door was unlocked. The room was cold. The bed was neatly made. Her bag was gone. He stood in the center of the room, a cold, sharp fury building in his chest. But it was not for her. It was for himself. He had done this. He had taken this small, brave, broken thing, and he had made her feel safe. And then, he had let his world in. He saw the local paper on the kitchen table, the one she must have read, with its blurry photo. He had not protected her. He had not protected her heart. And now, she was gone. Ava took a cab, paid for with the last of her own money, the emergency cash she had hidden in her shoe. She went to the only place she had left, her apartment. She walked up the 4 flights of stairs. Her new, solid deadbolt, his deadbolt, was on the floor. The door jamb was splintered, the door kicked in and hanging open. A cold, sick dread washed over her. She pushed the door open. It was not as she had left it. It was ransacked. Her few possessions, the cheap lamp, the single chair, the thin mattress, had been systematically destroyed. The mattress was slashed open. Her clothes were torn and thrown. On the wall, spray-painted in thick black letters, was a single word: soon. She stumbled back, gasping. This wasn't a robbery, this was a message. They knew. They knew where she lived. They knew she would run here. They had been watching. Not Vincent's men, them. She turned and ran. She clattered down the stairs, her feet slipping. She burst out onto the dark, empty street. She had to run. She had to hide. But where? Where could she go? A black van, its headlights off, screeched around the corner. It mounted the curb, blocking her path. 2 men in ski masks jumped out. Ava didn't even have time to scream. One grabbed her arms. The other clamped a chemical-smelling cloth over her mouth and nose. She fought, kicking and scratching. But she was small, and they were strong. Her vision blurred. The world tilted. She was dragged, limp, into the back of the van. The doors slammed shut, and the van sped off into the night. She was bait, and she had walked right into the trap. Vincent was in the guest house when he found her gone. He had been standing in the cold, empty room for over an hour, the rain lashing against the windows, the silence a deafening roar. He had looked at the neatly made bed, at the closet full of clothes she had left behind, at the single blurry newspaper photo on the kitchen table. He had not protected her heart. He had failed. The fury he felt was cold, and it was directed entirely at himself. He had taken something clean, and he had, by the simple, brutal fact of his existence, soiled it. Russo stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, his face pale. "Boss," he said, his voice quiet. "She's not at the apartment. It's bad." Vincent's head snapped up. "It's been tossed, kicked in. Spadaro's men, for sure. They left a message. Soon." Before Vincent could even process the violation, the other phone rang, not his personal cell, the heavy, encrypted satellite phone he kept in the guest house for business. It had never rung here. He picked it up. "I do hate a woman who runs," a voice said. It was Rico Spadaro, his voice slick with triumph. "You've got her all worked up. Moretti. She's a skittish thing." Vincent's blood did not boil. It turned to ice. He closed his eyes, and the world narrowed to a single, sharp point. "Where?" he said. His voice was not a request. It was a flat, cold command. "Ah. Spadaro laughed. "No fun in that. Let's just say she's appreciating the fine architecture of the old shipyard. Warehouse B, you know the one. And Vince, come alone. Unless you want her pretty, heartbroken face to be the last thing she ever has." The line clicked dead. Vincent opened his eyes. He looked at Russo, who had heard enough. "He has her." Russo nodded, his face grim. He said, "Come alone. It's a trap. Boss, a kill floor." "Get Sal," Vincent said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Get Marco. Get every man who owes me blood. I want every gun we own." He said, "I don't care what he said." Vincent interrupted, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "This isn't business. He's not getting a negotiation. He's getting a war." He looked at Russo, his eyes black, all traces of the man who had sat by Ava's bed gone. "Kill on sight. Everyone. Burn the building. I don't care about the collateral. I don't care about the product. I don't care if the whole pier burns. Get her back." The blackness was thick, and it smelled of burlap and old fish. Ava's head throbbed, a sharp, metallic pain behind her eyes. She was moving, bouncing, jolting. The van, when it stopped, she was hauled out, her hands bound so tightly behind her back with a plastic zip tie that her fingers were numb. A rough burlap hood was yanked off her head. She was in a warehouse, vast, cold, and empty, save for a few stray crates. Rico Spadaro was there, sitting on a folding chair, a wide, smug grin on his face. "Well, well, look who's back in town, the little ghost." Ava said nothing. She was not a fool. She knew what this was. She was bait, and bait, she knew, was disposable. She looked at Spadaro, at his 2 thugs, and she did not beg. She'd been in worse places than this, with worse men. She had survived them all. "He's not going to like this, Rico," one of the men said, pacing nervously. "Moretti. He ain't reasonable about this kind of thing. He's a man, isn't he? Spadaro sneered. And men are stupid, especially when it comes to this. He walked over to Ava, tilting her chin up with a dirty finger. Not much to look at. He must be getting soft. Ava met his gaze, her own flat and cold. "Ah, she's not scared," Spadaro mocked. "She thinks her man is coming to save her." "I don't have a man," Ava said, her voice a low, steady rasp. "And I don't need saving." Spadaro laughed, then his face hardened. He backhanded her, a hard, stinging slap that snapped her head to the side. "You'll learn to beg, just like he will." A third man, younger, with a cheap knife, was tasked with guarding her in the corner while Spadaro made his phone call. The man was arrogant, pacing in front of her. "So, you're the one," he said. "The one who got Rico beat down." Ava was silent. She watched his hands. She watched the knife. "He's gonna kill you." "You know," the man said, trying to get a reaction. "After Moretti is dead, he's gonna give you to us, and we're not gonna be gentle." He leaned in, his face close, his breath sour. "Maybe I'll get a preview." He never saw it coming. Ava had been working her wrists, not against the tie, but with it, creating a tiny bit of slack. As he leaned in, she drove her legs, pushing off the wall, and slammed her forehead into his nose. There was a wet, satisfying crack. He screamed, staggering back, blood pouring from his face. You bitch!" He lunged, and Ava, still bound, was ready. She kicked, her foot connecting hard with his knee, buckling it. He fell, and as he fell, the small, cheap knife he was holding clattered to the concrete, skittering into the darkness of the corner near her feet. Before he could get up, Spadaro was there, dragging him up by his hair. "You idiot! Get away from her! I need her alive!" He threw the man out of the main room, then turned to Ava, his face dark. "You're more trouble than you're worth." Ava, breathing hard, her lips split, said nothing. She just stared back, and with the smallest, most imperceptible movement of her foot, she slid it back, covering the small, dark shape of the knife. She would wait. Vincent's motorcade was a silent, black river. 6 cars, lights off, gliding through the industrial district. They were not going to the shipyard. They were going to the water. "He's expecting us at the gates," Vincent said, his voice a low hum in the back of the lead Escalade. "He'll have the whole place wired. We're not going in the front." "The water, boss?" Russo asked, turning the wheel. "It's a straight shot, but it's cold, and it's a long swim." "We're not swimming," Vincent said. He pointed. A long, low-profile cigarette boat was waiting at a private dock. 2 of his men dressed in black, giving him a quiet nod. The assault was not a brawl, it was a dissection. Sal and his team, the cleaners, took the land route, their job to create a diversion, a loud, violent one. At the main gate, Marco and 2 of the younger men were on sniper duty, scaling the adjacent warehouse to get a view of the roof of Warehouse B. Vincent, Russo, and 4 of his best men took the water. They cut the engine of the boat 100 yards out, gliding on the black, oily water to the old maintenance ladder on the pier. The diversion started, the distant sound of an explosion, followed by a spray of automatic gunfire. Spadaro's men at the front would be occupied. Vincent was the first one up the ladder. He moved with a speed and silence that was inhuman. This was his world, the shadows, the violence, the cold, wet air. He was a creature of it. "Marco," he whispered into his earpiece. "2 on the roof, boss," Marco's voice crackled back. "Both east side. Take them." There was no sound, just Marco saying, "Done." Vincent was at the side door, a rusted-out metal sheet. Russo was beside him with a hydraulic spreader. It was quiet, just a low, powerful groan of metal, and the locks popped. They were in. The warehouse smelled of fish, rust and fear. Inside, the diversion had worked. Spadaro was yelling, "What is that? Who is that? Get to the front!" "Boss," one of his men yelled back. "It's Moretti. He's here." "He's alone," Spadaro yelled, his voice echoing in the vast space. It sounds like an army." Spadaro grabbed Ava, yanking her up by her bound arms, and dragged her toward the center of the warehouse. "Get a light on us," he screamed. Get a light, Moretti, I'm here, and I've got your girl." A single, powerful spotlight hit them, a harsh, yellow circle. Ava, bruised and defiant, and Spadaro, a gun to her head. "You came with an army!" Spadaro shrieked, his voice cracking. He was losing control. "That wasn't the deal, Vince! You broke the rules!" A voice came from the darkness, not from the front, but from above, from the gantries. "You brought her into it," Vincent's voice boomed, cold and detached. "There are no more rules." "Show yourself," Spadaro yelled, pressing the gun harder to Ava's temple. "Show yourself, or she dies right now." "Let her go, Rico," Vincent's voice said, now from the left. He was moving. "No, you come out, or I swear to God." Ava, in the bright, terrible light, had been working. Her numb, bleeding fingers had been scraping at the concrete, finding the knife, working the small blade against the single, thick zip tie at her back. She had been sawing at it for 10 minutes. She felt the plastic give. She did not wait. She did not plan. She was a creature of instinct, a survivor. As Spadaro yelled again, "I'll do it, Vince! I'll do it!" She dropped her weight. It was not a fall. It was an attack. She dropped straight down, out of his grip, and as she did, she brought her hands, now free and gripping the small, cheap knife, forward and up. She drove the blade deep into his thigh, just as she had practiced in her mind. Spadaro screamed. It was not a word. It was a high, thin, animal sound of pure, unadulterated agony. He fired the gun, but he was falling, his grip on her gone, the bullet going wild into the metal rafters. She cut me, he gurgled, collapsing, clutching his leg where a river of dark blood was already pooling. The chaos was instant. The rest of Spadaro's men, seeing their leader down, panicked. The lights of the warehouse exploded on, all of them, and they were not alone. Vincent was on the gantry, a rifle in his hand, but he was not shooting. His men were everywhere. Russo at the back, Sal at the front. They had been in place for minutes. It was over. Ava was on her knees, gasping, the small, bloody knife still clutched in her hand. She looked up. Vincent was there. He wasn't on the gantry anymore. He was walking toward her, moving out of the shadows. He was not the man from the piano. He was not the man who had held her while she cried. He was covered in blood, not his own, and his eyes were wild, black, and completely, terrifyingly empty. He was the monster. He walked past his men, who were rounding up the survivors. He walked past Russo. He walked past the screaming, bleeding form of Rico Spadaro, who he did not even look at. He stopped in front of her. She was still on the floor, looking up at him, her body shaking, the knife in her hand. He was the devil. He was the Reaper. He was the only man who had ever bought her lunch. He looked at her, at the blood on her split lip, at the raw, red marks on her wrists, at the knife in her hand, and the monster was gone. The emptiness in his eyes flooded with a pain so profound, so devastating. It took her breath away. He knelt in front of her, his knees cracking on the concrete. He did not touch her. He just looked at the knife. "Ava," he whispered, his voice a raw, broken thing. She let the knife clatter to the ground. He opened his arms, and she fell into him, her small, shaking body collapsing against his solid one. He lifted her, his arms wrapping around her like steel bands, pulling her so close she couldn't breathe, his face burying in her hair. He was shaking. The most dangerous man in the city was shaking. He lifted her into his arms, one hand under her knees, the other supporting her back, and stood up, holding her as if she weighed nothing. "No one," he whispered, his voice a low, guttural vow, his lips against her temple. "No one touches you again, ever." She didn't know when she passed out. It was not a faint. It was a collapse. The adrenaline that had held her together, the terror, the fight, it all evaporated, leaving behind a bone-deep, crushing exhaustion. She was aware of the smell of his skin, a mix of cold air, iron, and expensive soap. She was aware of the rumble of the Escalade, and then, nothing. She woke to silence and softness. She was not in the warehouse. She was not in her apartment. She was in his bed, the massive, dark wood bed in his mansion, the one she had seen but never entered. The sheets were impossibly soft, the blankets heavy. A fire crackled in a fireplace that was large enough to stand in. She was clean. She was in one of his soft, long-sleeved t-shirts. Her bruises had been tended to. Small. Neat bandages were on her wrists. He was there, not in the bed. He was in an armchair by the fire, a tumbler of whiskey untouched in his hand. He was watching her. He had not slept. He was still in his black tactical clothes, though they were clean. "Ava," he said, his voice hoarse. "You brought me here," she said. It was not a question. "You're safe," he said, as if that explained everything. "Safe," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. She sat up. Her body ached. Every bruise, every cut, every old fear screamed, "There is no safe. Vincent, not with you. I will make it safe," he said, standing up. "I will kill all of them. I will burn." "Stop!" she cried, and the word was a plea. "You don't get it. You can't. You are the fire. You don't burn things to keep me safe. You just burn me." She threw the covers off, her legs shaking as she stood. "I cannot live like this. I cannot be this. This person who is bartered and hunted and locked in a tower. I won't be your prisoner. It's not." He took a step. "It's not prison. It's protection." "It's the same thing," she yelled, her voice breaking. "You said I eat at your table. I remember that, at the deli. It was the first time I felt seen. But this life," she looked around the opulent, magnificent, empty room. "This life, it doesn't just feed you. It chews people up. It chews them up and spits them out. I will not be your meal, Vincent." He stood there, taking the words like bullets. He had no defense. She was right. "I'd leave it," he said. His voice so quiet she barely heard him, she stopped. "What?" He walked to her, and for the first time, she saw no monster, no boss, just a man, a desperate, broken man. "The life," he said, "the business, my father's legacy, all of it. I'd leave it. I'd burn it all down for you. We would go. Tonight, we would go. Somewhere. Anywhere. I'd buy a bakery. I don't care. I'd leave it for you." He meant it. She could see it in his eyes, the wild, desperate, terrifying sincerity. He would do it. And the tragedy of it, the impossible, heartbreaking tragedy, settled on her. She reached up, her hand, small and bruised, and touched his face. She shook her head, a single, devastating tear sliding down her cheek. "You can't," she whispered. His face crumbled. "Ava!" "No," she said, her voice stronger, though it was breaking her. "I don't mean you won't. I mean you can't. It's not a job. Vincent, it's you. It's in your bones. It's the way you walk. It's the way you breathe. You can't leave it any more than you can stop your heart from beating. And even if you did, it would never, ever let us go." He had offered her his entire broken soul, and she had, with the simple, terrible truth, told him it was not enough. His face, which had been so open, so raw, so full of this impossible hope, shuddered. The mask slid down. The boss was back. He took a step back, and the space between them was suddenly a cold, unbridgeable chasm. "I see," he said. His voice was flat, empty. He turned and walked to the massive, dark wood door. "Vincent," she whispered, her heart screaming. He stopped, his hand on the heavy, brass handle. He did not turn around. "You're safe in this house. No one will ever touch you here. You can stay. You can go. It doesn't matter. You are free to do whatever you want." He opened the door. "But I can't let you go." He walked out, closing the door with a quiet, final click. He had given her freedom, and in the very same breath, he had told her she was his prisoner. He had left her, utterly, completely, and finally at his table, and she was, for the first time, truly, hopelessly, lost. He had said, "You are free to do whatever you want." For 3 days, Ava tested the truth of that statement. She stayed in the vast, silent guest room in his mansion, a room larger than her entire old apartment. She ate the food prepared by a silent, terrified staff. She read his books, and he never came. She was a ghost in his house, and he was a ghost in her life. On the 4th day, she walked. She put on the simple, practical clothes his men had bought for her, the only things she had. She walked down the grand, curved staircase. She walked through the marble foyer. She walked to the massive front door. A guard, a new man she didn't recognize, moved to stop her, his hand going to his ear. He said, "I am free to go," Ava said, her voice clear and cold. The guard hesitated, his face a mask of conflict. "He said," she repeated, looking him dead in the eye, "that I am free." The guard slowly, reluctantly took his hand away from the door handle and stepped aside. She walked out the front door. She walked down the long, gravel drive. She walked through the 10-foot iron gates, which were, for the first time, standing wide open. No one followed her. No Escalade appeared. She reached the main road, and for the first time in months, she was truly, terrifyingly alone. She got on a bus. She went back to the city. She went back to her old life, or she tried. She got a job, not at the hotel, not at the laundromat. Those places held too many ghosts. She found a small 24-hour diner called The Open Door and got a job as a dishwasher. The work was hot, wet, and exhausting. It was a return to the familiar ache of her back, the smell of bleach, the life of survival. But it was not the same. She was not alone. She would leave the diner at 2 a.m, her hands raw and red from the scalding water, and she would see him, not Vincent, but his men. A dark, nondescript sedan parked at the end of the block, its engine off. A man at the counter of the all-night bodega, nursing a coffee for 3 hours, his eyes never on her, but always aware of her. He hadn't let her go. He had just changed the shape of the cage. It was no longer a small, locked room. It was the entire city. She was the most protected dishwasher in the state. While Ava was scrubbing pots, Vincent was dismantling his world. He was in his father's study, the one in the penthouse, not the mansion. His capos were there. They were not happy. "You're shutting down the South Side?" Sal. The capo, who had called Ava a liability, was incredulous. "Vince, that's 30% of our income. It's a cash cow. It's a slaughterhouse," Vincent said, his voice flat. He was tired. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 months ago. "It's high risk, high violence, and it brings too much heat. We're getting out. We're moving the money into legitimate shipping. Clean." "Clean?" Sal scoffed. "We're not in the clean business, boss." "We are now," Vincent said. He looked at the men, his father's men. "Rico Spadaro is gone. The war is over. The old way is over. I'm restructuring. Anyone who doesn't like the new business model." He leaned forward, and for a second, the old, cold boss was back. "Is free to leave. You will be given a very generous severance. But if you stay, you will be clean. We are done with the street. We are done with the noise." He was doing it. He was actually doing it. He was trying to stop being the man she said he was, the man with violence in his bones. He was cutting out the parts of himself that she was afraid of. It was a slow, bloody, and incredibly expensive amputation. Ava knew nothing of this. She just knew the ache in her back, the steam in her face, and the silent, watching car at the end of the block. It wasn't enough. Survival. It used to be all she wanted. But now it felt thin. It felt empty. She had seen him. She'd been seen by him. She couldn't go back to being invisible. She started walking during her breaks, exploring her old neighborhood. She found herself outside a small brick building with a faded sign, the Harbor Light Women's Shelter. She stood there for a long time. Then she walked in. She met a woman named Miss Evans, a social worker with tired eyes and a powerful, no-nonsense kindness. Ava started volunteering, first just sorting clothes, then in the kitchen. She knew how to scrub, how to clean, how to work. One night, she was helping a young woman who had come in with nothing, her eyes wide with the same terror Ava remembered from her nightmare. Ava, without thinking, just sat with her. She didn't offer advice. She just listened. "You're good at that," Miss Evans said later, handing her a cup of tea. "At what?" "At seeing," Miss Evans said. "Most people, they want to talk. They want to fix. You just see them. You know what it's like, don't you? To be invisible." A small, sharp spark ignited in Ava's chest. It wasn't the heat of passion. It wasn't the cold of fear. It was purpose. She enrolled in a night class to get her social work certificate. She was going to be the person she had needed. 2 months passed. The cuts on her wrists were pale, silvery scars. The bruises were memories. The man in the car was still there. She was different. She was no longer just surviving. She was building, but there was a piece missing. A heavy, dark, unmovable piece. She had a life, but she did not have a self. She was still living in his city, under his protection. She was free, but she was not. She had to see him. She did not go to the mansion. She did not go to the penthouse. She went to Il Sospetto. It was 8 at night, the dinner rush. She was wearing her diner clothes, her hair in a braid, the smell of bleach and old coffee on her skin. She walked in the front door. The maitre d', a man who exuded snobbery, moved to block her. "Can I help you?" His voice was a dismissal. "I'm here to see Vincent," she said. The man's smile was thin. "I'm afraid, Mr. Moretti is not—" "Ava!" The voice came from the back. It was Russo. He was standing by the kitchen doors, looking older, tired but relieved. He nodded to the maitre d', who stepped aside, his face pale. "He's been waiting for you, miss," Russo said quietly. "Ed, he's here. He's always here," Russo said. He eats here, alone, every night." He led her not to the main dining room, but down the familiar stone steps to the wine cellar. He was there. He was sitting at the small, round table. It was set for 2. It had been, she realized, set for 2 every night. He stood up when she walked in. He was not the man from the warehouse. He was not the boss from the meeting. He was the man from the piano, only more so. He was wearing a dark, soft sweater. He was thinner. The power was still there, a coiled, quiet thing, but it was overshadowed by a profound, bone-deep weariness, and his eyes, when he saw her, the sadness and relief that flooded them almost brought her to her knees. "Ava," he said, and his voice was rough, as if he hadn't used it in days. "You knew I would come," she said. "I hoped," he said. He didn't move toward her. He didn't touch her. He just saw her. "You look different." "I'm different." They stood in silence, the air thick with 2 months of unspoken words. "The men," she said. "The car, at my diner. I told you," he whispered. "I can't let you go." "I'm not yours to let go," she said, her voice soft, but hard as steel. "I'm not your possession. I'm not your liability." "I know," he said. He gestured to the other chair. "Please, sit." She sat. He sat. The waiter, the same one from before, appeared, poured her a glass of water, and vanished. He looked at her, his hands clasped on the table. "I've been changing things. The business, it's cleaner, it's smaller, it's quieter." "Why?" "Because you were right," he said. "It was in my bones. I'm trying to cut it out." She looked at this powerful, dangerous man who was trying to remake his entire world because of a single, broken girl who had counted coins in a deli. "It's not enough," she said. He flinched, as if she had struck him. "I know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out, not a wad of cash, but a set of keys and a deed. He slid them across the table. "It's the diner, the open door. I bought it. It's yours. And the building above it, the apartments and a fund. You will never, ever have to work for a man like me again. You will never have to count coins." He leaned back, his face a mask of exhaustion. "You don't have to love me, Ava. You don't ever have to see me again, but you deserve to never, ever count coins again. Take it, go, be free, be safe. That's all I have." She looked at the keys. She looked at the deed. This was it, the ultimate act of possession. He had bought her. He had bought her a life. But when she looked at his face, she saw no triumph, only surrender. She pushed the keys back across the table. "No," she said. His face crumbled. "Ava, please, just take it." "It was never about the coins, Vincent," she said, her voice finally, completely steady. "I've been working at the diner, yes, but I've also been volunteering at a women's shelter. I'm getting my certificate. I'm helping people. People like me. I'm not surviving anymore. I'm living." She leaned forward, and she was the one with the power now. It was never about the food. It was never about the money. It was about someone finally seeing me. He stared at her, as if he had never seen her before. And, in a way, he hadn't. This was not the girl from the deli. This was not the victim from the warehouse. This was a woman. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice raw. "Now," she said. "We make a new deal." He waited. "I will not be bought," she said, "but I will be a partner. That fund. We're going to use it for the shelter. We're going to build a new wing, a real one. You and your legitimate shipping business are going to sponsor it." He was stunned. "Ava. A place like that. My name. Your name will be nowhere near it," she said. "It will be anonymous. But you will do it, and that's not all. I will not be your secret. I will not be a mistress or a ghost or a liability. I will be me, and you will be you, and we will be together in the light. No more shadows. Vincent, no more lies." He was shaking his head, not in denial, but in awe. You want to be with me? After all of it?" "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I want to try. I want to build something. Not just survive. I want to build. With you. But beside you. Not under you. Not behind you. Beside you." He stood up, his chair scraping. He walked around the table. He stood in front of her. He looked down at her. At this impossible, brave, beautiful woman who was offering him not forgiveness, but a future. "You," he whispered, "are terrifying. You haven't seen anything yet," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. He reached down, his hands finding hers, and he pulled her to her feet. "Yes," he said. "Yes, anything. Whatever you want. Honesty. Safety. Beside me. Yes." And he kissed her. It was not the desperate, hesitant kiss of the doorstep. It was not the passionate, consuming fire of the guest house. It was a kiss of homecoming. It was a kiss of hope. It was slow, and it was deep, and it was, for the first time, real. The final scene was not in the wine cellar. It was in the mansion. But the heavy, dark velvet drapes were gone. The windows were open, light streaming in. The old, dark, heavy furniture had been replaced. The house was warm. Ava was at the head of the massive, polished dining table. She was not alone. Miss Evans was there, and two of the other social workers from the shelter. They were poring over blueprints, laughing. "And this," Ava was saying, pointing, "will be the new daycare center. We need it to be soundproof." Vincent walked in. He was not wearing a suit. He was in slacks and a button-down shirt, his sleeves rolled up. He was carrying a tray with coffee. He looked, for all the world, like a normal man. He smiled at Miss Evans, who smiled back. He set the coffee down. Ava looked up, and her smile, for him, was bright and real. Later, the women were gone. The house was quiet. They sat at the table, just the two of them. But they were not at opposite ends. They sat side by side, their chairs close. The table was full. Her plate was full. He had cooked a simple pasta, the one he had learned from his mother. The silence was not empty. It was full. It was full of safety. It was full of second chances. Over the table, in the warm, late afternoon light, Vincent reached over and took her hand. She laced her fingers with his. He looked at her full plate, at the light in her eyes. He smiled. "From now on," he said, his voice low and full of a feeling she finally, truly, understood. "This isn't just my table. It's ours. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We hope you enjoyed this journey with Ava and Vincent. Where in the world are you listening from? We would love to know. Please drop a comment and share your thoughts on the story. If you loved it, don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more tales of love and danger. We cannot wait to read what you think.